I don't want to be strong like man who look pretty. I want to be strong like bitch that fight bears in the forest.
So, episode 8, I think.
Episode 8.
In the holiday stressors theme, we're quickly approaching the main event for us who celebrate Christmas. Hanukkah has already started.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. It's crazy. I can't believe Christmas is like right around the corner.
Yeah. So when this comes out on Wednesday. So Christmas will be what? 5 days away?
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's wild. Wild. So this episode is holiday traditions, which I'm super excited about. And I think it's interesting. I want to preface this with, we're not talking about like what holiday traditions are the most awesome, because like I think some people get down that rabbit hole of like, oh, this is the most great holiday tradition that I have. We're talking more about how like holiday traditions can impact, again, like our overall wellness.
Right.
So we're kind of taking a different approach to it.
Keep trying to circle back to that.
Yeah. That the holidays, while fun and great and wonderful, also carry a lot of things that can negatively impact health and wellness. And I think it's important to bring light to those because it's not something that gets talked about around the holidays.
It's true.
Yeah, you get every once in a while, it's like, something tragic happens and you'll hear about like suicide prevention and those kinds of things, but there's a lot of contributing factors, and I think it's important to discuss those so we can be aware of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of families or individuals have their own ways of celebrating the holiday season. And there's usually a few kind of staple traditions that a lot of people do or are incorporated in a lot of families' traditions. So there's the family photo, sending Christmas cards, which is something I do very sporadically. I am not consistent.
I like when those two things like intertwined when it's like a family photo on the Christmas card, so you have to like double down.
Right? You've got to get the timing right.
Yeah.
Lots of folks bake cookies or decorate cookies, decorating the home. Movie marathons or specific movies or shows that people watch at the holidays. Some folks go out and look at Christmas lights.
Did I send you that Instagram reel? That was like, it was like the same lady, but she was like, hey, are you going to do the light thing this year? Oh, no, we're not doing that light thing. We got the other light thing. Oh, yeah, the one where you go drive around. No, this one's at the zoo. And it was just like this whole like banter on like how they just put lights on everything at Christmas. And then you do like, oh, I can only do one light thing a year. We did the tacky one last year.
You did not send me that.
It was really
and now I want to see it. So you're going to have to go find it when we're done.
Okay.
So while these traditions are important, they help form foundations and structure within the family and the family dynamics. They can be cultural traditions, religious traditions, just passed down from family members. And they can help create lasting memories and like a sense of belonging and comfort during the holiday season, especially when all these other stressors are going on, right? That we've been talking about for 8 episodes. So while they're really important, it is also important to understand or remember that some traditions need to evolve and change over time. We as humans evolve and change over time. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Life situations evolve, families blend, dynamics change, children move out and grow up and have their own families. So.
So when thinking about your holiday traditions, like we have gotten a couple of questions of like, okay, how do I know that it might be time for my traditions to evolve or update or do those kinds of things. So a good way to think about it is kind of reflection. I like to talk about reflection, especially around this time of year. It's incredibly helpful, and it brings up this time of year brings up a lot of feelings already. So why not reflect on how you got there? And so evaluating your traditions, and a good way to look at them is not just whether or not they are like convenient, because a lot of things are inconvenient to do, but rather if they're healthy and helpful is really like a good place to start. So while it may be inconvenient for you to like get to your parents' house to celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas, their place might be the most helpful for the rest of the family due to like its central location, or maybe they have the space to house all of the events and those things. So like trying to think about it not from a convenience factor, but really just like the overall helpfulness or healthiness of it. Another way you can reflect is kind of like check in with yourself or your body. This sounds very crunchy, but how are you feeling about like an upcoming event or a tradition? Like, do you feel yourself getting more stressed or anxious or irritable about those things, or even uncomfortable? That's your body trying to tell you, like, that's a pretty good cue of kind of some deeper emotions around that tradition or that. And you know, we kind of usually go to like surface level of like, oh, well, it's just not fun anymore, or, you know, I don't want to cook for everyone.
Right.
But really digging down and think about why you're feeling that way of like, okay, well, maybe it's that you're underappreciated for your cooking, or it always falls to you and the financial burden falls to you and you're stressed about that, or it's not fun anymore because family members aren't supportive of your sexuality or your new partner, those kind of deeper things. So like really digging down and trying to figure out what those are. And then lastly, the trap of obligation. Just because we've always done something one way doesn't mean that everyone is enjoying it or that we need to continue doing it that way. So if you notice people's stress levels, maybe not just your own, but maybe your parents are really stressed about hosting what used to be a small, intimate, like Christmas Eve dinner, which is now 25 plus people, maybe it's time to rethink or reconsider that tradition.
Perhaps.
Maybe. And maybe they're totally into it. But like, if you see your mom who's just like, you know, the cartoon with like flames coming out of her head, and she's just like, I'm so stressed about this. Like, well, why are we doing it then?
Yeah.
Like,
what's the point?
Maybe we can think about why we're doing this.
Yeah. That sounds like my mother. It's funny. We were just talking about this when we spoke last weekend before, because I'm not going anywhere for Christmas this year. So like, I'm just hanging out at home. Gracie and I are going to like chill.
I would like to point out that everybody you have told that to, nobody's been like, oh, I'm so sad. Everybody's been like, oh, so good for you. Oh, that sounds wonderful.
They do. And that's what my mom said. She was like, that sounds so nice. I would like a day where I have nothing that I need to do. I can just sit here and not have to do anything. And she loves hosting. She loves cooking for us and like spending time with the family in this way. But like, she's tired. She's been doing this for how long?
Yeah.
And so we were talking about this, and yeah, it's funny because we were talking to Allison about it.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yes.
Today's Monday. So yesterday during our gingerbread madness.
Which if you haven't seen, go back to our like YouTube and Instagram. It's hysterical.
It's great. But yeah, nobody is like, oh, that's so sad. You're not going to see your family. Like you said, they're all like, that's amazing. How do I get that?
Like, oh, I wish I could do that. That sounds so nice.
It's like, you can. You just have to be willing to say no to everything.
And set boundaries and like hold firm.
It's helpful when you don't live anywhere near your family, because then but like also, it's expensive.
You've done a good job of like staying firm. Like, you know, people could very easily be like, well, how about I pay for half your ticket, or like those kinds of things. And I think you've done and made good compromises of like, well, how about I come at this time when it's a little less expensive and like we can still do all of the fun holiday things without it being in the like balloon of like Christmas or Thanksgiving where everything is astronomical.
Right. And it's so hard and it's so stressful. This was our very first episode was holiday stress while I was traveling.
Yeah.
But it helps that I don't live near my family and I just saw family this fall, which is a big reason why I'm not traveling this winter. And it's very cold up north and I'm not doing that. So I will go see them when the snow melts. I've already done a lot of talking today, so
You're doing great. That was hysterical.
Okay, so these traditions that are stressing us out. How the hell do we start changing them?
Ooh, those are
good. First off, be prepared for a wide range of emotions and responses, like anger, blame, sadness, nostalgia. Sometimes maybe joy. I don't know. It sounds like people are ready to be done with
maybe,
holidays.
Yeah, I think that is a key thing to remember is like there's just going to be a whole lot of emotion about changing traditions. And we could go on a tangent about anything, but specifically around holiday for all the reasons you said at the beginning of like, they're really tied into like family structures and dynamics and bonds and all of that kind of stuff too. So it becomes really hard. One thing that we would suggest is like when you bring up the conversation, try to focus on those positive emotions that the tradition brings. So instead of being like, well, now it's really inconvenient for me to do X, Y, or Z, start with something more like, oh, I love how we all come together and share breakfast on Christmas Eve, but our schedules won't allow us to always attend this.
Right.
And so it can just kind of help to emphasize when it's not necessarily going to be a permanent change. And maybe it's because the kids are young or you have a job where you work shift work and those kinds of things. So bringing it up, being really compassionate with how you bring it up, emphasize the positive things and kind of stress that it may not be a permanent change. You might want to make it a permanent change, but maybe the first
introduce it slowly.
Introduce it slowly. Maybe the first conversation isn't where you want to be like, for the rest of my life, this is how we're going to do it.
No more Christmas.
No more.
That's a little extreme. Yeah, start slowly. And keep the focus on your experiences. So, I appreciate that we all love to exchange gifts, but finances aren't going to allow me to buy presents for everyone this year. And offer solutions. Like with any change, it's helpful to have like an alternative or a plan in place for what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, okay, we can't afford presents for everyone. What if we do a Secret Santa or a white elephant? And that way we're not all buying gifts for everybody, but we still get to have that exchange that we all love.
Yeah.
And that way it's not a demand for change. It's an offer of an alternative that would still allow for the experience in a way that works for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say this all the time. Be ready to compromise. Like the holiday traditions can mean a lot to family members, and it can be really hard for people to come around to change. Think about
change is hard.
Like if you have your grandparents who are still living, maybe these are traditions that they had with their parents, and so there's that nostalgia there, and so it can be really, really hard for them to kind of get on board with those things. Or even your parents or whoever. It's just really hard to change. I think also being like really curious when you bring up the conversation.
Yeah.
So like saying, hey, I know we do this, but why? Like, where did this tradition stem from? I want to learn more about what it means to you and why it's such an important thing that we do. Whatever it might be. Maybe it's hiding the little pickle on the Christmas tree, and everybody has to be there to find the little pickle.
I don't understand.
It's an American tradition that people like to say is German. You have these little, those like little glass blown kind of like ornaments.
Yes.
Well, one of them is like a pickle, and it's green, so you hide it in the tree, and then the kids, whoever finds the pickle, gets like a special gift.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a thing. I don't know.
Okay.
We never did it.
Alright.
I know a lot of families that did. So, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then around this like compromise, like discuss what your desires are for the holiday. You know, you may want to create new traditions with your children or your spouse, or like we said earlier, you know, enjoy more quality time rather than hosting for 20 plus people.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot. There's not a lot of chance for intimate conversation.
Yeah, no.
In a large group.
No.
Yeah. And, you know, when making suggestions.
It's going well.
We haven't even started the bourbon yet.
I know. Stay tuned.
When making suggestions for new traditions, think about your audience. You know, logistics and finances play a big part in, well, everything, but especially the holidays. So a holiday trip may not be feasible for family members with young children or a large family. Yeah. Or a lavish dinner out may not be accessible for those with tighter finances, especially if they have that large family.
Yeah, right.
So just thinking about that and keeping in mind like who is going to be included in that tradition, and what that's going to look like for everybody.
Yeah. So before we wrap this up, what is a family tradition that you like really enjoyed or have seen done, or something that you would want to start? Like what tradition? And you can't just say not having to travel and visit anybody on the holidays.
I've already started that tradition.
You're like, this.
It's great. That is never going away. No, it's so funny. We were just talking about this at our staff meeting last week with my day job. It was custom programs' turn to run the meeting, so they of course started with a go around question in true Outward Bound style. So yeah, it's hard. Coming from divorce, which has been my whole life. So like there's no aw moment. Like it's totally cool. I'm good with it. There wasn't like a consistent tradition because I was changing locations each year and like things just change. So I was trying to think about this because that was the go around question. What's our tradition? And I think the consistent thing through my childhood was leading up to Christmas. So between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we would watch the TV guide, the book, right?
Yes, the book.
That's how old we are. The book that you get in the mail with the TV guide and all the programs. So we'd watch that for 3 shows, 3 movies.
I bet I can name them.
What are they?
It's the claymation Frosty.
Not claymation, the animated one. Animated Frosty, yes.
The claymation Rudolph the Reindeer.
Yes.
And then the Santa Claus.
No.
The Kris Kringle one?
I mean, we'd watch, Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Yes.
We sometimes watch that, but the big 3 were Frosty, Rudolph, and the Grinch.
I missed the Grinch.
Those were our top 3. If Santa Claus is Coming to Town happened to be on, we'd watch it, because that's also a good one.
It is.
That's with the Burgermeister Burger.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That's going to be my tradition for Christmas. I have them all on DVD. Because we're that old. So we'd watch that. So we'd like watch the TV guide, see when it was coming on. Because of course we didn't have it on like tape or anything.
No.
We had to wait for it to show up on TV.
Yeah.
And then we'd make popcorn and hot cocoa, and me and my mom and my brother would sit and watch those 3 movies.
They're great.
And we'd have to yell at her to get back inside from her smoke break during the commercial.
If you were born at a time where there weren't commercial breaks, I pity you, because you don't know the stress level of trying to get back into the room.
The anxiety.
Like, the anxiety of like make it back before the commercial ends. So you get
sliding across the floor to get back from the bathroom.
It was intense. Yeah, I love those movies.
And fighting for your seat back because, of
Yes.
course, your sibling took it as soon as you got up.
Of course. Yeah. Always.
So that's kind of the tradition that we had growing up.
I like that.
What's yours?
We have a lot of like little things that we always did, but nothing was like labeled a tradition. But one thing that always happened, no matter what, was my brother and I are always very excitable, and I'm a Christmas elf, and so my mom typically would work nights, or does work nights, and so she usually would pick Christmas Eve to work because then she would get home and be ready to go. And have just been up, and then she would take a nap after Christmas morning. So Christmas morning was always like our big thing.
Yeah.
That was our tradition. But Stephen and I would be up so early that they had to put a rule in that we had to make coffee for them. So we learned very early on how to make coffee and bring them coffee before we could start. And you had to make coffee, and we couldn't wake them up before 6 a.m. So
That seems fair.
We would go out into the living room and stare at the tree and try and guess which presents were ours.
Without touching anything.
Yeah, without touching anything. So, and my mom did a great job of, she never used, like, we weren't oh, everybody gets this one wrapping paper for your present. She would mix it up. She would change her handwriting for Santa. Santa always had completely different wrapping paper that was hidden, so we never saw the Santa wrapping paper, so we didn't know that she had it, because again, Christmas elves are definitely looking for those things.
I mean,
so she was really tricky with that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She also had this one roll of paper that lasted like until I was in my 20s. She couldn't remember where she got it, but it was the never-ending wrapping paper roll. It was huge.
I feel like that's my T-Rex wrapping paper. I've had that for a couple years now.
I mean, I think like it was like this big. It was insane.
I love that.
Yeah. So those were our some of our traditions.
So, and I didn't look at the clock before we started this. I'm assuming we still have time because your last paragraph is very short. Gracie, I did have a question that I thought of when we were talking about the changes that happen in our lives.
Yeah.
So you have a significant other, a spouse, if you will.
I do.
How did that affect or change you and your family's holiday traditions?
I think we've done a good job. So Shelby and I have been together a long time.
Yes.
We'll be 10 years next October. So that's a combination of dating and marriage. And so we've done a really good job. While we were dating, we would go to our respective families, and usually one or the other would go visit a couple of days after. So that was always kind of fun. And then when we moved in together and then were fiance and all of that, we started spending the holidays together because we wanted to spend time together.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve was kind of determined that like the thing that her family wanted. They do a Christmas Eve brunch. And Christmas morning was always big, so it just worked out conveniently that we would drive down from the Northeast and bypass my family in Maryland and come to Richmond and then hang out for like 4 or 5 days ahead of that, do Christmas Eve, and then leave Christmas Eve night, drive to my family, do Christmas and then 3 or 4 days afterwards, and then drive back to New England. It was a lot of work. It's still a lot of work, even living here now. Like 4 hours to my family, and things could change in the future. My brother has a daughter now, so like he wants to spend Christmas morning at his house. So it's
there's that evolving.
There's that evolving that is probably coming. But it changed. Not a lot, and I think we're due for like, hey, maybe we need to evolve this because
a big
we've been
disruption
doing it for the same way for a while now, and it's not always the most relaxing time. I would say that it's fun, and we get a lot of great quality time in, but it's not necessarily relaxing for us. We're always on the go during Christmas, those 2 days, Christmas Eve and Christmas. So
it's always interesting to me. Obviously, as a person who spends most of my time single, I've had very few instances where I've had to do that shuffle with a significant other. So I'm always curious how people
It takes a lot of
manage that.
Like good communication between us to figure out. And yeah, I think we've managed it fairly well. And I think moving forward, we will be talking about an evolution just because we own a house and we want to set our own traditions and we have experiences that we want to do around the holidays. So this is timely because we'll probably take some tips from this episode if I have a say in it. Yeah, cool. So to wrap this up, what's the goal of holiday traditions? You know, like really figuring out what your goal is. Is it to create moments of joy and love? Hopefully that's what the goal is. Hopefully it's not just about obligation and like resentment of like, trying to make me do this. Try and remember and keep your lines of communication open. Focus on the feelings you hope to achieve with your new traditions and be open to compromise. Yeah. So don't forget to listen to us on all of the things: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that's it.
We're also on Instagram. We mentioned a gingerbread decorating. So if you haven't checked us out on Instagram, you should definitely follow us. And starting in January, we're going to have some friends coming on, some guests, to talk about things in the health and wellness space. We have our dear friend Becca, who's going to be talking about some nutrition and fitness in January, also very timely. Our friend Allison, who was on yesterday with us.
Sneak peek there.
Yeah, sneak peeking. Dr. Allison Beal of Formation Physical Therapy is going to be coming on. Shelby is going to be coming on in February. She's an Olympic weightlifter and works full time and trains in Olympic weightlifting with some goals. We have guests coming. We have lots of things. Don't forget, if you have feedback, you should leave us a comment, write a review, DM us if you have questions about anything.
Yes.
And keep following along because it really helps us.
Follow us, like us, rate us.
We're trying to get sponsors.